Hey guys, welcome to Mad Scientist Barbecue. I'm Jeremy Yoder, and today I am really excited because I'm going to be doing something that you've probably never seen before. I'm going to be cooking pork ribs and then wrapping them in butcher paper, and inside that butcher paper is going to be smoked lard. I got this idea because when I was smoking briskets and started adding beef tallow, it completely changed the game. And then when I started smoking that beef tallow, it took it to a whole new level. So I want to know, if I treat the ribs the exact same way, is it going to take my rib game to the next level as well?
I am so excited to partner with Reynolds Kitchens Butcher Paper for this video. This paper is developed specifically for use on smokers, and it's the only paper with an easy-to-use slide cutter. It seals in moisture while protecting the crisp bark that all meat enthusiasts work so hard to achieve, so I can't wait to see what it's going to do for these ribs today.
A few years ago, I was away from home and I wanted to cook a brisket because I pretty much always want to cook a brisket. But the problem was I had no butcher paper. I could find wood, I could find a smoker that I could use, I could find salt and pepper, but you know what I could not find? Butcher paper. So I got on Twitter and asked people if they knew if there was any place for me to find butcher paper, and there was nothing. So I ended up going to the grocery store and using a paper grocery bag to wrap my brisket. Turned out okay, but it would have been a lot better with butcher paper. Now that Reynolds is making butcher paper, you can go to your grocery store or Amazon and get exactly what you're looking for, and you don't have to use a grocery store bag. Similarly, when I lived in LA, I decided I wanted to make tamales because I'd eaten some tamales there and I thought they were amazing. So I was going to make some for myself. So I went to the store, got all the ingredients, but I couldn't find any lard. So I used a replacement. I used a vegetable shortening because I thought, it's about the same thing. Well, let me tell you, it is not the same thing, because the tamales I made with the replacement, disgusting. The tamales I made when I actually found some lard and tried again, amazing. Similar to when I was a kid, my mom used to fry bacon in a pan, and then she would take out the bacon, leave the grease in there, and use it to fry eggs. The flavor of those eggs is something I still think about today, and nothing feels more satisfying than a breakfast with eggs fried in bacon grease. So let's see if wrapping ribs in butcher paper and a little bit of lard is going to take them to the next level. You guys have seen me cook ribs a bunch of times, so I'm only going to focus on those things that I'm doing differently this time. So I have 6 racks of ribs in here. There are going to be 3 baby back ribs and 3 St. Louis cut spare ribs. The reason I'm doing both is because the St. Louis cut spare ribs have a little bit more connective tissue and a little bit more fat, whereas the baby back ribs don't have as much connective tissue or fat. So I want to see if doing it this way is more effective on one than the other. But let's take a look and see how they're doing. So these guys are looking really good. We have really good color, and this is about the time I would wrap. So what I'm gonna do is take 2 of the St. Louis spare ribs, wrap those in paper and lard. Then I'm gonna take 2 of the baby back ribs, wrap those in paper and lard. And as a comparison, I'm gonna take 1 of each and leave it unwrapped just to see how that turns out in comparison to when I wrap it in the paper. Let's talk about why I smoke the lard. Now, there are 2 kind of broad categories of compounds in organic chemistry. There are hydrophobic compounds and hydrophilic compounds. So hydrophilic compounds are things that like water, and hydrophobic compounds are things that don't like water. The smoke produces tons of organic compounds, thousands actually, that go through the smoker and are going to flavor the things you put in there. The things that are going to be water soluble will be absorbed by the meat. The things that are fat soluble will be absorbed by this lard. So there are going to be some compounds that show up in flavor in the lard that wouldn't show up on the meat. Because pork ribs don't have a lot of exposed fat, you miss out on some of those great flavor compounds if you don't have some way to get it onto the ribs themselves. So when I put the lard on the smoker about 4 hours ago, it was completely clear. Now it's got kind of a golden hue, which tells me it's absorbing that flavor that I'm after. With all the groundwork laid, it's time to wrap these guys up. There's another big benefit to using lard or tallow when you wrap in paper. Remember earlier we talked about hydrophilic and hydrophobic compounds? The lard is hydrophobic, which means it repels water. So when you soak the paper in the lard, it actually holds in more water than it would otherwise hold. You get some of the breathability that paper offers, but you don't trap everything in like you would trap with foil. So when I put a bunch of that lard on the butcher paper, it's going to prevent water from going through the butcher paper as easily. There will still be some water entering and exiting, but not as much as there otherwise would be. It provides a lot of the protection of foil, but it doesn't keep everything trapped in the way foil does. The plan now that these ribs are wrapped are we're going to let them cook at 275 until they're nice and tender. Now, if you've cooked ribs before, you've probably heard of the 3-2-1 method. In my experience, when people try that, a lot of times the ribs get overcooked. And I'm thinking that maybe using butcher paper would be a way to do the 3-2-1 method and get perfectly cooked ribs rather than something that's just mush and falling off the bone. Okay, it's been about 40 minutes, so let's check in on these ribs because I'm looking for tenderness, but I kind of want to see, just out of curiosity, what the temperatures of these racks are and see how much quicker the temperature rises in the ones that are wrapped versus the ones that aren't wrapped. Wow, 207. Feels done. Check this one. 196, check this one. 200, check this one. Hitting a bone. There we go. 198, first one unwrapped. 162, this one. 164. So these guys are definitely lagging behind. Done. Couple more minutes. I think this guy's done. Close. That's pretty. Talk about juicy. All the ribs that we wrapped are done now. We're just waiting on these that are unwrapped, and I keep spraying them because I don't want them to dry out. I want a good comparison here. So we're gonna let these keep going. Probably it's gonna take an extra 45 minutes, but we're gonna take the others inside and taste them. We've let these ribs sit for about 30 minutes, so now it's time to find out if I've discovered rib greatness or if I've totally ruined these ribs. So as I look at these ribs, I see a nice dark red color, which tells me that I put smoke flavor on this. But also, I'm getting an aroma of smoke flavor coming up from the ribs that I don't usually get. So that tells me that something different has happened here. I think what's actually happened is that lard that I put on has kind of sealed off the meat side of these ribs and kind of held in that aroma. It's held in the smoke flavor, plus given additional smoke flavor from the smoked lard itself. So I am really excited to get into this. They're glistening with this rendered fat. And if you've heard me say it once, you've heard me say it a million times, what you perceive as moisture is usually rendered fat. Also, I think that the hydrophobic layer, that is the lard, has kind of held in all that liquid that would usually come out when you wrap in foil. So that aqueous layer isn't spilled out all over the foil. Instead, it's locked in these ribs. Is rolling. Ready. So as I look at this, it's glistening with moisture. That's a really good sign. Also, coincidentally, the smoke ring on the top side and the smoke ring on the bottom side are so thick that they're almost touching in the middle. And at this part of the ribs, they actually are. So I don't think that has anything to do with the lard or the butcher paper, but interesting to note. I hope that the thickness of those smoke rings gives me some indication of how much smoke flavor I got here. So I'm going to take a bite and see what I've got. Wow. I think those might be the best ribs I've ever made. Wow. There's so much smoke flavor in there and so much moisture. Because when you cook ribs, you're always fighting a battle. Basically, you can leave them unwrapped for longer and get more smoke flavor. But you lose water and you lose rendered fat, you lose the moisture. And so it's a balancing act. With this, I have tons and tons of smoke flavor, but there's so much moisture in there that I think this is probably the only way I'm going to cook ribs in the future. So for the St. Louis spare ribs, I think this has been a resounding success. Tons of moisture. There's actually so much moisture in here, I feel like I could have let it go even longer on the smoke before wrapping. So in the future, I'm definitely going to be testing this out again. I would encourage you all to test it out. But let's get into those baby back ribs and see how the new wrap affected that. So I'm curious to see how this has benefited from this process because this is a leaner cut of ribs. Also on this one, the ribs are thin enough that the smoke rings actually do touch. But there's still lots of juice in here. Everything's glistening again, so that tells me this should be a juicy bite. Let's see how it is. Wow. That's so good. I can taste the smoked pork lard in there. A clear signal of smoke flavor there. Really, really enjoyable. And it is very, very moist. Now, I cooked these before wrapping for just over 4 hours. For a lot of people, they would think that if you do that, everything's going to dry out. Not when you do it like this. This is phenomenal. I want to keep eating. All right. My first impressions of using this method are very, very good. These are probably the juiciest ribs I've ever made. If I had to change one thing about it, what I'd probably do is I'd take that pork lard and put it on the smoker for something like 8 hours to get even more smoke flavor into that fat. Because that smoke flavor is there when I take a bite of these, but I want even more of that flavor. So let's get the other two racks and compare them. All right, I have these ones that were unwrapped for the whole time, and they did take a little over an hour longer, but as I'm looking at it, you can tell that there's some differences. There's a darker color here. Obviously, the bark hasn't washed off from a wrapping process, but they look good. Nothing seems to be burned, so let's try these and see how they compare. Here I have the St. Louis spare ribs, and then here I have the baby backs. Both of these went unwrapped the entire time. So the unwrapped baby backs first, let's see. So these are interesting. With these, you kind of have a crunchy layer at the top. You definitely get smoke flavor, but it's neither as tender nor as juicy as the ribs that we wrapped with the butcher paper and the lard. So I think smoking the lard, adding that in, gives you that extra smoke flavor that you're really after if you're trying to do it unwrapped. But you don't get the moisture when you don't wrap that you get with that lard. It's just insanely good. So let's see if the unwrapped St. Louis ribs suffer from the same dryness that those baby backs do. Wow, okay. So these are much better than the baby backs unwrapped, but they're not bursting with juice like the St. Louis ribs were that we wrapped and added the lard to. So, you know, this really isn't bad. If I had this at a barbecue place, I would think it's very good. But those other ones, I would go find the guy who's cooking all those and ask him, hey, what did you do? Because this is ridiculous. Now, to verify these results, we're going to have to do this more often in the future. So if you guys want to try it at home, please try it. Let me know in the comments how it worked out for you. For me, it's lights out incredible. The juiciness of those ribs, you have to taste to understand. I want to give a big thank you again to Reynolds for sponsoring this video. I think they make a great product with a slider that makes it easy to use. So check them out. I'll put links in the description, or you can find them in grocery stores as well. If this video was helpful to you, please let me know in the comments down below. You can hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at MadScientistBarbecue. I'll see you guys next time.